Shalom. This week we are going to take a short introductory look at the Feast of Trumpets, where in Leviticus 23:23, God commands Israel, "Again the Lord spoke to Moses, saying, Speak to the sons of Israel, saying, In the 7th month, on the 1st of the month, you shall have a rest, a reminder by blowing of trumpets, a holy convocation. You shall not do any laborious work, but you shall present an offering by fire to the Lord." In Hebrew, the Feast of Trumpets is called Rosh Hashanah and means the head of the year in English. It is a Sabbath day, a holy convocation. All the months on God's calendar start with the new moon. But Rosh Hashanah is the only annual festival of God that commences on the new moon, which is the start of the biblical civil new year. However, new moon in God's timing is a little different from the new moon of pagan timing. The biblical new moon is the very first sliver of light coming from the dark orb of the moon. That moon without any light being reflected from it. And is said to be akin to time itself, or a person being renewed or reborn or born again, which itself is a picture of being resurrected to new life. And this all happens at Rosh Hashanah, just as our new life happens at our being born again in the Spirit, or the actual resurrection in our physicality. These understandings are ancient. We can see these ancient ideas about Rosh Hashanah expressed and described in the biblical text of Matthew. "And he will send forth his angels with a great trumpet, and they will gather together his elect from the four winds, from one end of the sky to the other." And in Corinthians, "In a moment, in the twinkling of an eye, at the last trumpet, for the trumpet will sound, and the dead will be raised imperishable, and we will be changed." Or 1 Thessalonians, "For the Lord himself would ascend from heaven with a shout, with the voice of an archangel, and with the trumpet of God, and the dead in Messiah will rise first." And finally in Revelation, "After these things I looked, and behold, the door standing open in heaven, and the first voice which I had heard, like the sound of a trumpet, speaking with me, said, Come up here, and I will show you what must take place after these things." Thus, every month at the start of, or the head of the month, which in Hebrew is Rosh Chodesh, is seen as a picture of a symbolic rebirth. That new moon identifies when the new month, its new life, starts. But the new month is never a Sabbath, except here at Rosh Hashanah. That raises a problem with Rosh Hashanah because the people are ordered to have a feast day with a holy convocation. In other words, a Sabbath day with a Sabbath worship service on that very day. But what if the dark orb of a black moon stays dark that night? Or what if you thought the moon was going to stay dark, so you didn't start the Sabbath of Rosh Hashanah at sunset the night before? Then you couldn't have a holy convocation because you didn't start the Sabbath of Rosh Hashanah at sunset as the Bible requires. All because you thought that night was to be a blank moon, the dark orb, not a new moon. But instead, that sliver of the new moon appears sometime during the night, maybe even towards morning. Then you would have missed Rosh Hashanah, for you would have not started its Sabbath on time, at sunset the night before. Now, if you erred on the other side, it's no big deal, because then you have just over-celebrated by an extra day and would continue the celebration of Rosh Hashanah an additional day, the next day. So this is the dilemma of Rosh Hashanah, but it is easily resolved in that one chooses the second option above and celebrates it when the moon is blank. And if the sliver appears, you are good. If the sliver of the moon does not appear, you look for it the next night. And thus the day of Rosh Hashanah ends up being and is termed by the Jews as the day no man knows, or the day only the Father knows. Because Rosh Hashanah then becomes one long day that encompasses 2 days, a 24-hour period hidden inside a 48-hour period of time. Thus it is also the hidden day. And why did God do this, hide this day? It is said by the rabbis because God was hiding this day from Hasatan, so he wouldn't know the day or the hour when God's trumpet call would come to call God's people, Israel, home. Because Rosh Hashanah is also an ingathering of God's people, which is a picture of all God's people coming home out of the diaspora, out of this fallen kingdom of the adversary of God, and back into God's kingdom. But wait a minute, Israel already has the modern nation of Israel now. True, but the Roman diaspora is still in play because only about half of the Jews from around the world have returned to the geopolitical nation of Israel, even though the prime minister and the head rabbi of the nation of Israel have sent out an invitation to every Jew around the world to come home. When God sent his Messiah as Messiah ben Joseph, that is Yeshua, into this fallen kingdom of the adversary of God, Hasatan still remained in control of this fallen world, even though that kingdom of the adversary of God was issued at that time its death warrant. But that warrant has not been executed yet. That serving of the death warrant to the adversary of God comes at Rosh Hashanah, when the least time of this earth given to Adam, who then voluntarily gave it to Hasatan, expires. Then God's kingdom will be set up here on this fallen earth. But before that happens, the earth has to be re-sanctified, and thus the 10 days of awe, culminating with Yom Kippur, the Day of Atonement, commences. But that is yet another festival of God, which is thus another video for another day. Shalom.